everyone, and welcome to the latest episode of the Nothing But Locks podcast. I'm your host, Ali Melnicki, accompanied by my favorite coworker, Robert Kowalski. How you doing this afternoon, Robert?
Ali, doing great. Here we are. Kind of blew right past February. Did that month even happen? I don't even know. It feels like it just went by in a blink after the Super Bowl. Covered the pros, and today I'm looking forward to our episode covering the college basketball slate.
Yes, and we know after not college football, after the NFL, college basketball is my all-time favorite sport. I love this time of year. I love the conference tournaments. I love, obviously, March Madness. I've been watching a lot of college basketball. I'd say in the last 2.5, 3 weeks. Saw a pretty good game last night. Well, it was a blowout, but I did have the over in the UCLA game. They did blow out Arizona State. I really like UCLA a lot. So we are definitely getting into the thick of things with college basketball. And let's not waste any time with this, Robert. We have a lot to cover. Let's start with odds, because obviously we're the Nothing But Locks podcast, and we do talk odds all the time. Today, looking at not the conference championships, but the national championship, who currently are the favorites? And then after you pick out the favorites, who do you think has the best value?
Yeah, that's just great, right? So I've basically tracked and I've put candle graphs to pretty much every school in Division One. So my number reaches well past. I mean, heck, I go probably top 125 right now, just because, well, that's kind of what I do. So if we break it down, we have some pretty good representation across the conferences. But if we're looking for the odds to win the national championship, your number one choice is the Houston Cougars. You could probably find them as high as probably 8-1 in some shops, followed by the Jayhawks and then the UCLA Bruins, both at 10-1. Rounding up the rest of the top 10 is Alabama and Purdue, anywhere between 11-12-1. And then it starts to get a little bit up higher into the teens and 20s with Arizona, Baylor, UConn. Good job, Huskies. They're about 21-1. Gonzaga probably, it's just a kind of a different year. I'm sure, Ali, you're going to want to touch on them later. I don't have them any better than 25-1. And then we go to Texas at 26. And then the next one in is Tennessee at 30-1. I sure would like to talk to you about them.
So I had been on another podcast, Back Your Play podcast, do a great job with Rich on there, Rich Q. And I've been talking the last few weeks how much I love UConn. I think they had a very bad few weeks in January. Other than that, I love this UConn squad, Robert. I think their guard play is spectacular. I think the Big East, as always, is a very underrated conference. I've watched them multiple games. They seem to have everything together. I think at that price, I would take UConn. How about you?
Yeah, shout out to Richie, by the way. It's a really, really sharp guy. I'm glad that you get a chance to chat with him every once in a while. For me, UConn, absolutely the class of the Big East. I don't find many more that can stick with them. Sure, the conference is well balanced. And to me, if we had to just take a look at the Big East as a whole, pretty wide open. But for sure, for me, UConn, definitely a top 10 school, heck, almost a top 5.
Yep.
The problem that I have with them is their performance against top 25 teams, schools. Let's call them schools. I feel better when I call them schools. Top 25 schools with their record. They played 7 games against the top 25, Ali, and they're only 3-4. So that's the one little ding I've got against them. Otherwise, a 23-7 record so far as of the recording of this podcast. An incredible job by the Huskies.
And I do place a lot of weight in head coaching as well when it comes time to for the conference. I love Dan Hurley. I love his brother, Bobby Hurley. I think that this team has the potential to definitely get to an Elite Eight. I will probably pick them to go further. I mean, I say that now. It depends how the bracket lays out. But another team I do like, Robert, that you mentioned right at the end is Tennessee. I had them beating Alabama a few weeks ago. They were 3-point favorites. They did beat them at home. They've had kind of like a few rough games here and there. But what do you think about the Volunteers?
Ali, I mean, look, 22-8 record. For me, I have them ranked as some of the top schools in the entire nation this year. 5-3 against the top 25. And if you stretch it out and look at their record against the top 50, they have a really stellar record of 9-4. I've got them neck and neck with Alabama in the SEC. And honestly, I think that this is absolutely 100% a Final Four team. And look at their value, Allie. If you want to talk about some value to bet into this national championship, 30-1 in most shops. If I ever had to come out of retirement to make a bet, it would be on Tennessee to win the championship.
Yeah, I like that one a lot. Let's talk real quick. Overrated value. Which team is getting too much hype? They don't really have great value, but their value is a little overrated. Who do you think is overrated here?
Right. So good point there. Overrated to me is right. So you have to look at the price that you're buying them at versus their odds. If in fact we do one of two things. One, if you just see them as a price way too low at this point because they've been bet into so heavily, versus let's just say, okay, so I'm looking at you, UCLA, and I know you like them, so I'm going to tread lightly.
I do.
I'm going to tread lightly here.
You like UCLA?
Absolutely a top five team in the nation without a doubt. 26-4 record, but at 9-1 odds. Really not quite sure if I'd rather bet them now or just place straight bets on them as we make our way into, deeper and deeper into the tournament. You could just roll them over, and I'm pretty sure you'll probably be able to get better than 9-1 odds if you just bet them and roll them over all the way into the championship game, Allie.
Yeah, I do like UCLA, but to your point, not at that price. I agree with you. I think that value is a little overrated. Hey, they were a great team last year. They were in the Final Four. So I don't think it's a stretch to have them value that high. I know that the Pac-12 isn't necessarily strong. You're going to have UCLA in there. You're obviously going to have Arizona, USC most likely. But we've seen stronger Pac-12 conferences. It's not them this year, so they might be a little overrated. Quickly, before we get into the conferences, Robert, who's your sleeper? Let me know.
Okay, so there's two that I looked at, but the one that I definitely want to highlight today is K-State. Kansas State's got a 23-7 record so far. Really, really great performance in the Big 12. Honestly, they're right neck and neck with Baylor, and everyone's been talking about them as possible championship contenders. Here's why I point them out as sleepers. 6-3 record against the top 25, and even better against the top 50. They're 10-5, Allie, at 65-1 odds. Now that you're getting better than true odds. I mean, only 64 make it, right? So if you're looking for a sleeper pick to go ahead and sprinkle a couple of bucks on, K-State would be my pick.
Ooh, see, I'm not high on K-State this year. I did have them back in January when they upset Kansas. I did take them that game, but I thought that it was a favorable matchup for them. K-State, I don't know. I actually like West Virginia taking them on tomorrow and Saturday. West Virginia needs to win to get in. They're still right on the bubble. I like Bob Huggins' team going up against them. But K-State, I don't know if I'm sold. I've watched them a few times. I will say a sleeper for me is TCU. And one of their big guys, their main guys, Miles, has been out quite significant. He's missed quite significant time this year. I watched them beat Texas the other night, 75-73. I won't go into how I had them -3 and they lost.
Oh, no.
Bad beat I've seen in a long time. But that's for another day. But I do like TCU a lot, Robert. What do you think about them?
TCU at 30, you could get probably 36, maybe even greater, maybe even 40-1 if you shop around. Horned Frogs definitely performed very well this year. The one thing that I do want to point out about TCU this year, 20-10 record, kind of treading their way through the top 25. It's kind of hit or miss. 11 games against the top 25, so they sure are battle tested, right? Their strength of schedule is fantastic. But they're only 6-5 against them. So it kind of hit or miss there. I sure love to see them make a run. Not as confident in them as some of the other top tier schools.
All right, well, let's get into the conferences, and we'll start with obviously the top of the alphabet, the ACC. I'm going to just point out one of the most disappointing trends, and I hate to say it, but I am a UNC fan. And the fact that this team, Robert, started the preseason ranked first. And now they probably, I don't want to say probably, but they most likely won't even make the conference, not the conference tournament, but the whole March Madness bracket. What's going on with UNC? Do they have any hope of qualifying for the tournament, or are they an NIT team?
Yeah, I have a feeling that right now it's win or win and get in. Otherwise, they're probably not looking at getting in with their record at this point. This one, unfortunately for UNC Alley, is a wide open conference.
Yeah.
I did set up odds for schools to win this conference, of course. Super, super tight. Cavaliers, probably 3.5 to 1, followed by Miami at 4, Duke at 5, and then UNC at 7, with Pitt right behind them at 9, Clemson at 10. Any one of these schools can win the ACC this year. Really, really tight. If I had to go and pick one out right now in this really tight knit group, I know you're not going to want to hear this, but I really think it's going to be Duke and probably Miami in the championship.
Oh, wow.
UNC, as good as they are this year, they're probably a second tier behind Virginia. And why am I saying this? Honestly, again, if we just take a look at the strength of schedule, and I'm not really, calling out Duke in any way. I mean, of course, they have a good record. Only 2-2 against the top 25, and their strength of schedule really not that impressive. Uh, it's only a top 50 schedule that they've ran the gun against. If we looked at UNC, really hasn't improved much more there either. I have a feeling that if we had to go and break down the games, this is one that I really think that if UNC doesn't win the conference, they're not going to get an alley.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I think they need to win it outright. I don't know if UNC beats Duke tomorrow. What do you think, Robert?
0-2 record against top 25 and 3-7 against the top 50, alley. I don't think they win either.
Yeah, I agree with you. I don't know if I love Virginia this year. I've watched them, Robert, and they just don't look that impressive, even in their wins against like unranked opponents. They've just been they haven't blown anyone out. They win by very small margins. What do you see Virginia come tournament time?
I'm not impressed. Hey, if I'm not impressed by UNC, I'm not impressed by Virginia even more. They're definitely a second tier grouping in the conference for the ACC. And I really don't think, forget about Virginia being the team to beat. I don't think that they're going to even make it to the championship game for the ACC.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. I think the ACC is probably one of the weakest divisions in all of college basketball. Would you agree?
I do. Yep.
All right, let's move on to one of the ones I think is the strongest, and I always say they're very underrated, and that is the Big East. Robert, you have Marquette, Xavier, UConn, Providence, Creighton. They have very good squads. Who do you like the best out of all these teams?
Absolutely loaded. This is a conference that is so loaded. We could probably see 4, if not even 5, make it in, just even if they don't win the Big East. I'd be shocked if I don't see that, like you just mentioned them, UConn, Creighton, Marquette, Xavier. Those schools should make it in no matter what, no matter who wins the Big East. By the way, what happened to my St. John's Red Storm?
Oh boy, you and Rich both together.
I'm not happy about the result of this season, even though they want to, they started off the year red hot. I guess, again, strength of schedule proves everything once you start playing teams in the Big East. UConn definitely my pick to win the Big East Conference. There's some noise that I think can be made by Creighton or Marquette. So I think, honestly, we'll see UConn in the championship game. I think it's going to come down to either Creighton or Marquette to play them in the Big East for the championship at Madison Square Garden.
Yeah, I still love UConn out of all of these teams. I'm still going far, but I will say Xavier is one of the ones. I watched them beat Providence the other night. I really like that Xavier team. I love their guard play. I'm not too high on Providence. Marquette, I don't know. They do have a very good squad. I don't know if I trust them to go deep. Do any of these teams, in your opinion, Robert, besides UConn, because we already talked about them, but do any of these other teams have the potential to reach the Final Four? What do you think?
Oh, thank you for saying that. I was actually taking a look at the conference one more time and just thinking about Sweet 16. Forget about Final Four. Yeah, so back to Creighton and Marquette. Heck, even Xavier. So Creighton, Marquette, Xavier. Okay, I'm going to do this. I am. I'm going to go ahead and reach here. I think that all of those schools can make it into the Sweet 16. I really do. Creighton, Marquette, Xavier, UConn all could end up in the Sweet 16. that might be too much of a punch, but I'm going to take it anyway. Final four, I could see UConn making it, but no one else.
Yeah, I totally agree with you right there. I think they're a very good conference. They're gonna go deep, but there's only one. You got to pick out the big dogs, and pun intended, the Huskies, I think, are going to be that team. Let's move on. Let's just keep turning down here. The Big Ten. Now, Robert, every year I say the Big Ten is the most overrated conference in college basketball. You always have the Michigans. You always have the Michigan State. You always have Purdue. You always have Indiana. Iowa, I don't even want to talk to from last year. But I always feel like the Big Ten is the most overrated conference in all of men's college basketball. Before we debate that, let's talk about the unanimous number one, I believe, and that's Purdue. Zach Edey probably will get the Wooden Award Player of the Year. Is Purdue the team to beat in this conference? Like, do you see any, I'm not talking about the March Madness bracket, just the Big Ten conference for the tournament. Can anyone beat Purdue? Is this thing wide open? What do you think?
Yeah, great. So if I had to make odds on this conference, a little upside down, where it was a choice of either Purdue or the field, I'd still make Purdue the favorite. Very tiny, but I'd still make them the favorite. There's some people that might say, we could look at Indiana, but honestly, Ali, no, this is Purdue's conference to win. They should win this one handily against anybody. And whether you include Maryland or Michigan State or even Illinois. So look, to me, Michigan State, Illinois, West Virginia, they all candle graph the same. Maryland's a little bit better. They're a notch higher with Indiana, but this is Purdue above and beyond. They're really going to stand out here, and they should be the prohibitive favorite to win the Big Ten.
What about Indiana? I was talking on the podcast as well today that it's a different position, but Indiana's Trace Jackson Davis. He kind of reminds me of having the potential that we saw Kemba Walker have a few years ago, where he just basically carried that UConn team on his back en route to winning the national championship. Is Trace Jackson Davis that type of player, Robert?
Oh my God. By the way, do you understand? So first off, Trace is incredible. He is literally a one-man wrecking crew. He does it all for the team. And if, they'll go as far as Trace takes them. Do you understand who he's the son of?
I'm not sure. I don't think I know that much.
He's the son of Dale Davis, the Indiana Pacers. He is. He is. So no wonder he's got the genes and an incredible talent. He's far better than Dad ever was. But look, he's going to be amazing, but I'm certain that there's going to be a way that Purdue's going to be able to. You know what? There's probably a good chance that Davis and Indiana doesn't even make it into the championship game against Purdue. Should they make it, though, they'll probably make it a close game, but I still see Purdue winning this one.
Who's the sleeper of this conference? Because I've been watching Maryland lately, and they've really impressed me. Maryland's my sleeper. How about you?
If you go with a sleeper pick, let's choose looking at someone that's got strength of schedule bones here. It'll be Michigan State. Yes.
Going with Tom Izzo.
Yeah, 18 and 11 record, not really satisfying. It's not gonna, make anyone, jump out of their shoes and want to back them. However, they got that 18 and 11 record the iron way, right? They paid for this one. They've got the third hardest schedule in all of NCAA basketball. So they would be my sleeper.
All right. Well, I do like me some Tom Izzo. I'm a big Michigan State fan as well. So I would like to see that. And Michigan State's one of those teams you do want to see perform well come conference time. All right, let's move to the Big 12. Keep chugging along. Robert, Kansas to me this year, and I've watched a lot of Kansas games, including last week where actually West Virginia did almost beat them. But watching them as a whole, I've seen them beat Baylor by a significant amount. They beat Kansas State the second time. I think this Kansas squad, you look at Grady Dick, you look at some of the other guys, McCullough on the team, some of these guys, I think that this Kansas squad is better than last year's national championship team. Do you agree?
I agree, and here's why. I keep coming back to strength of schedule, right? So they've amassed a 25-5 record this year, Allie, with the number one hardest schedule in all of the land. they are better than they were last year. They did get better. And I think that this is absolutely, forget about a Final Four team. Ali, I think they're going to be a championship caliber team this year.
Oh, absolutely. I've just been so impressed. Bill Self has himself quite a squad here. You look at their guard, Dwayne Harris Jr. He's one of the most underrated stars, I think, in this conference, probably in all of NCAA basketball. You look at, like I said, Grady Dick, that guy can just swing threes. I think this team, and I'm not usually high on Kansas come tournament time because I always feel like if they're a number one seed, they're the first ones to get eliminated. They're the first ones to go. But this is a Kansas squad that I would be fearful if I am in their region. I really would. I think that they have so much. KJ Adams, great forward. They have so much depth. I don't know if there's a team that I would pick to beat them, to be honest. Maybe even UConn. I don't even know if I would pick UConn, but a lot will change in the next week and a half. There's a lot to see. Let's keep going in the Big 12. Will Baylor be back? Will they reach the Final Four again? They won 2 years ago. They won it all. I haven't been that impressed with this Baylor squad as some others have. Have you?
Right. Okay. So I'm glad you mentioned this. And for a listener at home, as you're opening up your bracket in next week and you want to start thinking about how you want to fill it out and how you want to start taking 1 or 2 seeds all the way to the Final Four, Baylor, if you do not see Baylor in the same bracket as Kansas, move them right into the Final Four. I know this is weird and jarring, but with a 22-8 record, Ali, they as well, some of the hardest schedules in the entire land. The fourth hardest schedule was played by Baylor this year. 8-6 against the top 25, so not as effective as Kansas was this year. However, if you find them in a easy, quote, easy bracket, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in next week's episode as we start to fill these things out. Kansas and Baylor, the number 1 and number 4 hardest schedule by basically strength of schedule. 8-6 for Baylor against the top 25 and 12-8 against the top 50. Fearless. So they've been playing everyone and anyone that comes their way. 22-8 record, Ali. Definitely. For me, if Kansas is the one, Baylor is the clear number 2.
All right, I could just live with that. How about Texas? Because they're another one. They kind of seem to be, it just feels like inconsistent performance with Texas. I don't know if I'm that high on them. I think it depends how they're shooting. If they don't come out and shoot, I don't give them much chance. What do you think of Texas?
Yeah, sneaky. I was going to say that they're probably neck and neck with Baylor. And obviously the two of them, a significant step down from Kansas. But there's a few things, Ali, that stand out for me that I really wasn't impressed with. Texas's schedule wasn't as strong. They played some games that really I expected them to win, and they blew late. So I'm concerned about their lack of closing ability. And to me, when you look at how they predict out, they could probably get eliminated. I mean, if we just look at the Big 12 as a whole, they're probably not going to make it into the championship game for the Big 12. They'll still make it in because, hey, I mean, I even talked about K-State at the start of the show being a contender, and they're in the Big 12 as well. K-State could be a team, to me, that could upset Texas pretty easily. So I'm not as confident in the Longhorns as most are.
Yeah, I agree with you right there. Let's go to the SEC. I think the SEC is probably the best conference this year in all of college basketball. Is that fair to say, Robert?
Yeah, no doubt. I mean, when you look at the top 2, and of course, we know who those are. It's Tennessee and Alabama. Incredible seasons, that they're about to wrap up for the SEC.
Yeah, they have just so much depth. But a team I want to point out because I always love Kentucky's squad. I'm a big Calipari fan. I think Kentucky can make some noise come not just the conference tournament, but March Madness, because they're peaking right now, Robert, and they've really flown under the radar the majority of the year. They went unranked for a long time. Now they're back, I believe, either 23rd or 24th. What do you think about Kentucky's prospects?
Okay, so definitely they're in my top 25, right? Oh, the 20-10 record thus far. The issue that I have with Kentucky is really they haven't played the best of it, and they really haven't performed well when they did. So
Right.
you're right, Ali. What we want to see is if you're looking to find a team that might have really started off bad back in December and January, but have come to form, that team is probably Kentucky. The issue that I have, again, 2-6 record against the top 25 thus far. Should they perform well starting this coming week in the SEC championship game? That's what I want to be on the lookout for. They do have a very tough hill to climb. Heck, I'd like to see them beat Arkansas before we start talking about beating Alabama
Yes.
or Tennessee.
Yes, and I do like them this weekend taking on Arkansas. That's one of my picks on Saturday. Robert, we kind of talked about before we get to the next conference that it is a long season. So a team like Kentucky, where yes, they might not have a great record against quadrant one, quadrant two opponents and whatever, a lot of those losses might have come back in December, January, before these teams start peaking. How much stock when you make your power rankings do you put into teams' momentum going into tournament time?
Significant. And I'm glad that you brought that up.
Yeah.
Pretty much if you look at my top 10, they've stayed consistent with where I found them to start off the year. Some teams that have drastically improved are so we're talking about teams that have peaked. Their candles are rising at the right time. Indiana, TCU, and some teams that actually are headed in the wrong direction. Duke, let's see here. Iowa. I had to mention
I am
Iowa.
not picking them this year. They're going out in the first round.
Iowa, and another team that has deflated at the wrong time is actually St. Mary's. They started off the year great, but St. Mary's is definitely headed ass backwards right now.
Got it. Let's move on to the American. I love Houston. I love what Sampson's done with that team. I just love the way they play defense. I think Houston, I know they don't play in the toughest conference, but I think that they are without a doubt one of the top three best teams in all of college basketball. Do you agree with me, Robert, or are you going with some of the other talking heads that say they don't play that great of an opponent and they're overrated? What do you think?
Thank you. And this is tough, right? This comes back to the old fool me once, shame on you, fool me twice. Shame on me. I don't want to have Gonzaga-itis here again this year. And I seriously think that this might be the case. Houston, number one in the nation. They've lost twice. They've lost twice in 30 games. However, it's the American Athletic Conference.
Right.
Ali, name another team in that conference that we could probably shake a stick at and say, yeah, you know what? You're probably pretty good. You got to go all the way down to Memphis.
I was going to say Memphis is the next best team, and I think they're pretty much a bubble team.
And they're a bubble team. That's the problem with it, right? And then if we dig a little bit deeper, we see Houston, that when they play the top 25, they played 2 games in the top 25, 1-1, right? And then against top 50, a little bit better, 4-1. But Ali, forget about a top 50 schedule from strength of schedule perspective. They're almost not even top 100. They have the 97th ranked strength of schedule this year. So they really haven't played anybody. So, the answer to the question, overrated or underrated, just from my graphs alone, probably overrated.
All right. I still got to watch them a little more because one thing too, and I say this in college football, I don't like to hold someone's schedule against them. You're given a schedule, you beat the teams that you have to beat, and you should get applauded for that. Now, I don't know how that's going to translate in the tournament, but I will say, I'll say that Houston's ranked right where they should be. All right, let's move on to the Pac-12. Robert, you and I watch a lot of Pac-12 because we're on the West Coast. I always say to the Pac-12 sneaky come tournament time because a lot of people on the East Coast, they don't stay up late. They don't watch a lot of the games. They don't know some of these schools. This is a little bit of a weaker Pac-12 than previous years. You have UCLA, you have Arizona, probably USC will make it. But I want to bring up Arizona. We talked about UCLA already. Arizona's kind of been under the radar. We know the controversy when Miller was their head coach a few years ago, but now they've kind of turned the corner. Is Arizona an underrated team coming up this tournament?
Vastly. I'll with a capital V. You're right. It's UCLA, Arizona, and then a precipitous drop off to USC. USC is going to need real work to get themselves into the tournament as well and make any kind of noise. But it's definitely we're underrating Arizona significantly. Look, it's not so much of how UCLA performed, because they've done great with what was put in front of them, right? So if we look at their record, 26-4. However, their record was only 2-3 against the top 25, right? So their strength of schedule is good. However, if we look at Arizona, again, Ali, if we just take a look at the way UCLA performed versus Arizona, I'm afraid that with UCLA's performance, and I know we just looked at here's the games that were put in front of them, right? But 2-3 against the top 25, their strength of schedule pretty much as equal as Arizona's. And guess what Arizona did against the top 25? 4-0 this year. Wow. So 25-5 record, 4-0 against the top 25, 8-1 record against the top 50. I've got Arizona not only rated higher than UCLA, I've got them winning the Pac-12.
You know what? I was just going to say, I think that UCLA is better than them, but when it comes to the conference tournament, I think that Arizona will win, and I don't know what to make of them yet come March Madness. I agree with you. I think they are underrated, but they're another team, even in the Sean Miller days, that just seemed to underperform when it came to the tournament time. But I do like Arizona a lot. All right, the last one, Robert, we have to do it. We have to go to the West Coast Conference and go to your school, Gonzaga. Now, I don't think you're going to be picking them this year, because this is my point. I think this is the weakest Gonzaga squad we've seen in years. Do you agree?
Yes. By the way, how loud wrong was I last year? Did I die on the hill or what?
You asked me if I would say Gonzaga versus the field, and I said without a doubt the field. You stayed with Gonzaga.
Oh my God, I was so sick. I'm having flashbacks. Look, I get it. They did very well with the body of work in front of them. Gonzaga this year, significantly weaker schedule than they've played in years. And St. Mary's is in the same boat, because they haven't really played much of anything either. Matter of fact, they've played weaker schools than Gonzaga has. Now, that being said, Gonzaga, top 10, definitely 25-5 record. However, against the top 25, Ali, a 5-4 record. Really haven't done much to improve themselves, year over year. St. Mary's kept things close in their championship game, but even them really haven't done much. A 1-2 record against the top 25. As I said earlier, about halfway into our show today, they've actually dropped off of their pace. And so they're headed in the wrong direction when it matters most. So West Coast, yep, they'll make an appearance, but that's pretty much it for me, Ali.
Yeah, I agree with you. I watch, this is the year Gonzaga goes and wins. That's gonna be what happens. I'm sure my dad will have them going all the way like he does every year. It's always Gonzaga and Duke. He always has in the finals. I don't understand why. All right. Well, that is our show for today. Robert and I are going to be back midweek next week to break down what's going on with the conference tournaments. And then we're going to have a special episode 1 week from this Monday. Obviously, the Selection Sunday is next Sunday. We're going to be on the air the day right after, breaking down the tournament, giving our initial thoughts, and then we'll do another episode right before the tournament kicks off. Robert, this is such a fun time of year. Do you agree?
Completely. This is it. I mean, if it's not the Super Bowl, it's March Madness for me.
All right. Before we sign off, Robert, any last thoughts or words for the audience?
Yes. Bet against West Virginia.
Oh, I like them tomorrow. Not to come tournament time, but I do.
Spread. Bet against the spread. There. Okay.
There you go. All right, everyone. Take care.